Cannons at Chaldiran. Brothers, I still remember that morning on the plain of Chaldiran in the summer of 1514. I stood behind the chain cannons with my fellow Janissaries, matchlock in hand, as the sun slowly rose over the hills. Before us stood Shah Ismail and his fierce Qizilbash cavalry, thousands of red-capped horsemen shouting battle cries, armed only with bows, lances, and swords. They believed that their courage and speed alone would carry them to victory. But Sultan Selim had prepared us well. Our cannons were chained together in a solid defensive line, ready to unleash destruction. When the order was finally given, the earth itself seemed to tremble. Iron cannonballs ripped through the charging horsemen again and again. We fired volley after volley from our matchlocks while their brave warriors crashed against our wagon line like waves breaking upon a rock. This episode explores the troubled final years of Bayezid II, the dramatic rise of Selim I, and the decisive Battle of Chaldiran between the Ottoman Empire and Safavid Iran. The rise of the Safavids, 1494 to 1508. The Safavids' rise in Iran. The year was 1502. 21 years had passed since Sultan Bayezid II, the son of Mehmed the Conqueror, ascended to the Ottoman throne. Throughout his reign, the Ottoman Empire focused on consolidating the vast territories won by his father. Although Bayezid achieved several military successes against Moldavia, Hungary, and Venice, he generally preferred peace over constant warfare. Unlike Mehmed, Bayezid devoted much more attention to domestic affairs than military conquest. He strengthened tax collection, reduced corruption throughout the provinces, and successfully doubled the annual income of the central government. At the same time, he actively encouraged trade, supported local industries, and promoted commerce across the empire. One of his most famous policies was welcoming skilled Jewish and Muslim refugees who fled Spain during the Spanish Inquisition. Bayezid also invested heavily in public works, building mosques, bridges, and charitable complexes across both the Balkans and Anatolia. These projects stimulated local economies while improving the lives of his subjects. By maintaining peace, the Sultan created the conditions necessary for greater agricultural productivity and growing urban prosperity. As a result, he left behind an empire that was not only wealthier but also more financially stable and administratively unified. However, by 1502, Bayezid was in his mid-50s and had gradually begun withdrawing from the daily affairs of government. Much of the administration was now handled by his court officials. Because of this, he became increasingly unaware of the dangerous developments unfolding to the east. There, Iran had descended into chaos following the collapse of the Aq-Koyunlu Confederation, the Turkoman dynasty that had long dominated the region. Ismail and the Qizilbash. Amid this growing instability, the Safaviya movement rapidly gained strength. Originally, the Safaviya had been a Sunni Sufi brotherhood founded in Ardabil. Over time, however, it evolved under successive leaders into a far more ambitious political movement. During the 15th century, leaders such as Junaid Safavi and Hyder Safavi transformed the order from its quietist Sunni origins into an activist and militant force. As part of this transformation, the movement gradually adopted Shia beliefs, especially Twelver-Shirism. According to these beliefs, the Safavid leaders were regarded by their followers as messianic figures similar to the promised Mahdi, the savior who, according to Islamic tradition, would appear at the end times to rid the world of evil and injustice. Hyder further strengthened the Safavid claim to power by marrying Halima Hatun, a daughter of Uzun Hasan himself. Yet as the Aq-Koyunlu state began to fracture during the 1490s, the increasingly Shia Safavids slowly turned against their Sunni overlords. As early as 1494, conflict broke out between the two sides. At first, the Aq-Koyunlu successfully drove the Safavids from their capital at Ardabil. What followed was a decade of exile for the Safavid movement under its new leader, the 7-year-old Ismail, the son of Hyder and Halima. During these years of exile, the Safavids rebuilt their strength. They recruited Turkoman tribes throughout Azerbaijan, many of whom had grown tired of the endless struggles among Uzun Hasan's successors. The Safavid cause offered these tribes an opportunity to gain both power and purpose. These followers became known as the Qizilbash, meaning redheads, because they wore distinctive red headgear with 12 folds representing the 12 Shia imams. Bound together by fierce loyalty and a shared religious identity, the Qizilbash viewed the charismatic young Ismail not merely as a political leader but as a divinely guided spiritual figure. This powerful fusion of religion and politics set the Safavid movement apart from its rivals and gave it an extraordinary ability to inspire and mobilize its followers. As the Aq Koyunlu continued to weaken under the strain of civil war, the Qizilbash became the foundation of Safavid military power. By the turn of the century, Ismail launched his first major military campaign. After years of rebuilding and exile, he invaded Shirvan in a surprise attack and successfully captured the region. Soon afterward came an even greater triumph. In 1501, Ismail decisively defeated the Aq Koyunlu at the Battle of Chaldiran, paving the way for the capture of Tabriz. Upon entering the former Aq Koyunlu capital, which he adopted as his own capital, the 14-year-old ruler proclaimed himself Shahanshah, King of Kings of Iran. Amid cheering crowds and a wave of renewed religious enthusiasm, the Safavid Empire was born. Within just 7 years, the remaining territories of the Aq Koyunlu would also fall to this rising power, leaving the Safavids poised to dominate the Middle East through a combination of religious zeal and formidable military strength. Ottoman-Safavid Cold War, 1505 to 1510. As the mighty Safavid Empire rose from the ashes of the Aq Koyunlu state, the Ottomans watched these developments with growing alarm. Shah Ismail's assertions. The Ottoman and Safavid Cold War. Shah Ismail's claims of semi-divine status and his promotion of Twelvershahism posed a direct challenge to Sultan Bayezid II, the leading Sunni ruler of the Islamic world. When dealing with their Sunni neighbors to the west, the Safavids adopted a strategy similar to the one that had helped them overthrow the Aq Koyunlu. They sought alliances with Shia, Sufi, and other non-Sunni communities in Anatolia, hoping to weaken the Ottoman Empire from within. Bayezid responded by first closing the border with Iran. He then ordered the forced resettlement of Shia communities throughout the empire. Many of these communities were moved from eastern Anatolia to southwestern Anatolia and the Morea, placing them as far from Shah Ismail's influence as possible. Despite these efforts to contain Safavid influence, Bayezid was unable to preserve peace with Tabriz. As early as 1505, Ismail's brother, Ibrahim Mirza, invaded Ottoman territory. His goal was to plunder border regions and recruit new soldiers in Anatolia for the Qizilbash cause. However, these raids were also designed to provoke the governor of Trabzon, Bayezid's 35-year-old son, Sultan Selim. Selim responded swiftly. In a brief but effective retaliatory campaign, he not only drove the invaders out of Ottoman territory but pursued them across the border to the town of Erzincan, where many Safavid troops were killed. Their weapons and large stockpiles of military supplies were also captured. These clashes between Selim and the Safavids highlighted the growing contrast between the prince's military philosophy and that of his father. For several years, Selim had repeatedly requested reinforcements from Constantinople to strengthen the empire's eastern frontier. Yet his appeals went unanswered, much to his frustration. Following the 1505 campaign, Shah Ismail sent an envoy to protest Selim's actions. Bayezid refused to return the captured weapons, but he welcomed the envoy with full diplomatic honors and sent him back with generous gifts. Seeing his son as impulsive and viewing the empire from a broader strategic perspective, Bayezid preferred diplomacy and reconciliation over confrontation. Instead, he believed the greater threats lay in the west and south. He had little desire to wage war on the eastern frontier, where supplying large armies across vast and difficult terrain would be both costly and challenging. In 1507, the Safavids launched another offensive. This time, Shah Ismail raided the Dulkadirid Beylik, passing directly through Ottoman territory while recruiting supporters from the local population. The incident was deeply humiliating for the Sublime Porte. Convinced that any sign of weakness would only encourage further Safavid aggression, Selim once again warned his father about the growing danger in the east. In one of his letters, he wrote, "From day to day, Safavid properties are significantly increasing. It is known that they are enemies of the Ottoman dynasty in both religion and nation. Great disorder and sedition are expected from that faction. If they continue to be approached with negligence and inattention, as was the case in the past, the disorder it causes may reach a level beyond control. And these disorders and tumults may spread everywhere in the country." Despite these warnings, Bayezid, far away in Constantinople, rejected his son's demands. He feared that such rhetoric would only inflame tensions between the Ottoman government and its own Shia subjects. Bayezid's reluctance to act did not stop Selim from taking matters into his own hands. In 1508, the Ottoman prince marched into Safavid allied Georgia, determined to send Shah Ismail a clear message: if his father would not defend the honor of the Ottoman Empire, he would. Within only a few weeks, Georgian forces were crushed by overwhelming Ottoman gunpowder weapons and artillery. More than 10,000 peasants were taken into slavery as the countryside was burned and plundered. Selim's successes continued 2 years later, when he launched a surprise invasion and defeated a Safavid army near the gates of Erzincan. These victories greatly strengthened his reputation among the Ottoman military. He was now widely regarded not only as a capable commander but also as a defender of the Sunni faith. At the same time, however, his increasingly aggressive policies deepened the divisions within the House of Osman. Civil war and the Sakalu Rebellion, 1502–1513, Bayezid's sons fight for power. By the beginning of the 16th century, the House of Osman had reached its greatest size in terms of male members. Sultan Bayezid II had 7 living sons and approximately 17 grandsons, ensuring that his dynasty would continue for generations. His eldest son was Seytsad Ahmed, governor of Amasya. Ahmed was respected as a skilled administrator, much like his father, and favored policies centered on peace and consolidation. Although he was popular with both the people and Bayezid himself, he was strongly disliked by the Janissaries because he lacked military experience and martial ability. The second eldest son was Seytsad Korkut, governor of Manisa and the preferred candidate of the ulama in the imperial capital. Having grown up at the famous court of Mehmed the Conqueror, Korkut developed a deep interest in science, poetry, and music. Yet, like his older half-brother Ahmed, he possessed little military talent and therefore failed to gain the support of the empire's military establishment. The third eldest son was Seytsad Sihinsa, governor of Konya. Because his mother descended from the Karamanids, Sihinsa ruled the province under especially difficult circumstances. Ever since Karaman had been incorporated into the Ottoman Empire, it had remained one of its most troublesome regions. The province had supported Sem Sultan's rebellion in 1481, served as the center of the disastrous Battle of Agakiri in 1488, and witnessed another failed Karamanid uprising in 1501. Now, it had become a center of Qizilbash activity and Safavid espionage, forcing Sihinsa to focus on maintaining order rather than competing for the throne. The middle son was Seytsad Selim, governor of Trabzon. By now, Selim had already established himself as a capable and vigilant military commander through his successful campaigns in eastern Anatolia and Georgia. Because of these victories, he quickly became the preferred candidate of both the Janissaries and much of the wider Ottoman military. Bayezid's youngest sons were Seytsad Mahmud, governor of Kastamonu, Seytsad Mehmed, governor of Kaffa, and Seytsad Alemsa, who remained stationed alongside his father in Constantinople. Although these 3 princes were the youngest members of the family, each commanded loyal supporters within his own province and therefore remained a serious contender for the throne. By this point, Bayezid's 7 sons were all between their mid-20s and early 40s. Each had governed his province for many years, making them perhaps the most experienced generation of Ottoman princes the empire had ever seen. Yet this wealth of experience also fueled fierce competition among the members of the House of Osman. For more than a century, the governorship of Manisa had been regarded as the unofficial seat of the Sultan's favored heir because of its close proximity to the imperial capital. However, determined to preserve peace within the royal family, Bayezid regularly rotated the governorship of this prestigious province among his sons. Over the years, the office passed from one brother to another. Then tragedy began reducing the number of contenders. Alemsa died in 1503. Mehmed died in 1504. Mahmud died in 1507. Each death eliminated another rival and left the governorship of Manisa vacant. Most observers believed that either Ahmed or Selim would now receive the coveted appointment. Instead, hoping to preserve the balance of power among his surviving sons, Bayezid deliberately left the position vacant rather than openly naming a favored heir. Far from easing tensions, the decision only intensified the rivalry. A furious Korkut, who had recently been reassigned as governor of Antalya, demanded that he be restored to his former position in Manisa. When Bayezid refused, the prince fled to the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt in 1509, seeking military assistance. Fortunately for Bayezid, history did not repeat itself. Another rebellion like that of Sem Sultan never materialized. After spending 3 years in Cairo, Korkut was finally pardoned in 1511 and returned peacefully to the Ottoman Empire. Although order had been restored, the entire episode demonstrated just how much political control Bayezid had lost over Anatolia. His sons now dominated the peninsula, each ruling his own territory with considerable independence. This reality was not lost on the empire's Shia population. In the spring of 1511, a significant Qizilbash. The Sakalu rebellion explodes in the spring of 1511. A major Qizilbash rebellion erupted in the Teak region of southwestern Anatolia. It was led by a local religious figure known as Sakalu, meaning slave of the Shah. To the Sunni Ottomans, however, he was known as Satankulu, or slave of the devil. A devoted follower of the Safavid order, Sakalu presented himself as far more than a rebel commander. He claimed a messianic role, attracting military and political support from various minority communities across Anatolia that had long felt neglected and marginalized by the Ottoman government. Under normal circumstances, a rebellion like this could have been crushed quickly by local Ottoman authorities. But to Sultan Bayezid's great frustration, the uprising spread across Anatolia like wildfire. One reason for this was that Seytsad Korkut, instead of returning to his assigned governorship of Antalya after his exile in Egypt, had occupied the vacant governorship of Manisa without his father's approval. As a result, he was absent from Teak when the rebellion first broke out. Rumors even circulated that the Ottoman prince was gathering an army to march on Constantinople and seize the throne for himself. Taking advantage of this disorder, Sakalu easily captured the regional capital of Antalya and proclaimed himself sultan before the people of the city. With disaster unfolding across his provinces, Bayezid ordered Karagöz Ahmed Pasha, the Beylerbey of Anatolia, to crush the rebellion once and for all. Gathering a relatively small local army, Ahmed Pasha pursued Sakalu out of Teak and across western Anatolia. As his army advanced through numerous towns, he witnessed the devastation left behind by the rebels. Sunni mosques had been burned, copies of the Quran had been destroyed, and farmlands had been looted and devastated. After several weeks of pursuit, Ahmed Pasha finally caught up with Sakalu near the town of Kütahya. What followed was a shocking reversal. Although heavily outnumbered, the rebels successfully ambushed and defeated the Ottoman force. In one of the rebellion's most brutal episodes, the captured Karagöz Ahmed Pasha was impaled before the walls of Kütahya, then beheaded, and finally his remains were cremated. While Sakalu's rebellion continued to engulf Anatolia, Shah Ismail exploited the chaos by sending his general, Nur Ali Khalifa, to invade Ottoman territory. During a brutal campaign, the town of Tokat was sacked, and much of the empire's eastern provinces was burned. Thousands of local Shias from the countryside, who had long been dissatisfied with Ottoman rule, joined the ranks of the Safavid army. As if matters could not become worse, Seytsad Sihinsa suddenly died while gathering his troops in Konya. According to Ottoman chronicles, the prince had been poisoned either by Safavid agents or by agents acting on behalf of his half-brother, Ahmed. With his eastern provinces now in flames, Bayezid dispatched his Grand Vizier, Hatem Ali Pasha, to restore order in Anatolia. Ali Pasha had long supported Seytsad Ahmed and saw this campaign as an opportunity to secure a decisive victory over the rebels while elevating his preferred candidate for the throne. During the heat of summer, the Grand Vizier pursued Sakalu and his rebel army across Anatolia until they reached the village of Kubukova, located between Kayseri and Shivas. There, he linked up with Ahmed and the prince's newly assembled forces. The battle that followed was fierce and bloody. By the end of the fighting, both the Grand Vizier and Sakalu lay dead on the battlefield. Ahmed's great humiliation. Although Sakalu's rebellion had finally been crushed, Ahmed had lost his greatest political ally and strongest voice in Constantinople. After the Battle of Kubukova, the shaken Ottoman prince demanded that the Janissaries swear an oath of loyalty to him and accompany him on a march to Constantinople to seize the throne. The elite corps refused. Their reason was deeply embarrassing. They argued that Ahmed had not personally led them into battle, but had instead remained safely inside his tent throughout the campaign. As if this humiliation were not enough, another devastating blow soon followed. Shortly after the battle, Ahmed's own son, Seytsad Murad, defected to Shah Ismail in an attempt to claim the Ottoman throne for himself. Murad fled to the Safavid court in Tabriz, where he publicly put on the distinctive red Qizilbash cap, much to the embarrassment of the Ottoman state.
These two humiliations severely damaged Ahmed's hopes of becoming sultan.
To many people across the empire, he now appeared incapable of commanding either his own army or his own son, let alone ruling an empire.
Selim makes his move in the struggle for the Ottoman throne. Sakalu's rebellion ultimately worked in Selim's favor.
The rebellion seemed to confirm everything Selim had been warning about for years, that his father and his administration were weak, and that his half-brothers were even weaker. By the summer of 1511, the aging and increasingly frail Bayezid, now in his mid-60s, had effectively lost control over Anatolia. All three of his remaining sons were openly preparing to replace him. While Korkut gathered an army in Manisa, Ahmed raised another in Amaja. Meanwhile, Selim sailed from Trabzon across the Black Sea to meet Mulai Giri, the Crimean Khan, in search of military support. Recognizing that Bayezid's reign was nearing its end and hoping to gain the favor of the man who might soon become sultan, the opportunistic Crimean ruler eagerly provided Selim with men and money for the coming conflict. In return, Selim agreed to marry the Khan's daughter, Ice Hatun. This marriage marked the last time a member of the House of Osman married into a foreign dynasty. By midsummer, Selim decided to take the offensive. He crossed into the Balkans, hoping to win the support of the region's leading nobles. Before leaving Crimea, he appointed his only son, Seytsad Suleiman, as governor of Kaffa. After landing at Ackerman, Selim's mixed force of Crimean Tatars and Balkan peasant soldiers spread rapidly across the region. Their advance was so swift that it forced the Beylerbey of Ramelia, Hassan Pasha, into a hurried retreat south toward Greece. By July, Selim had captured the old Ottoman capital of Edirne, where he entered into negotiations with his father. When those talks failed, both sides prepared for the inevitable battle. Selim's hastily assembled force of 30,000 men faced Bayezid's 40,000-strong army near Tekirdağ. Outnumbered and facing the elite Kapikulu troops of his father, Selim was defeated and forced to retreat back to Crimea. After a single battle, it appeared that Selim's bid for the Ottoman throne had come to an end. Fortunately for him, Bayezid was about to make one final mistake. Returning to Constantinople, Bayezid believed he had finally restored peace to his empire. Confident that the crisis was over, he sent word for Ahmed to come to the capital as quickly as possible. The elderly sultan had decided that the time had come to abdicate and formally crown his favorite son as his successor. The Janissaries choose a sultan for the Janissaries in Constantinople. Bayezid's decision was unacceptable. They deeply disliked the sultan's favored son, Ahmed. In response, they poured into the streets of the capital. Before long, open street fighting erupted between supporters of the government and supporters of Selim. After several weeks of bloodshed, Bayezid finally capitulated. The fall of Bayezid to the Janissaries had made their choice. Bayezid ordered Selim to come to the capital to restore order and appointed him commander-in-chief of the Ottoman army. But when Selim arrived in Constantinople in the spring of 1512, he acted quickly. With Bayezid having completely lost the support of the army, Selim launched a coup and deposed his own father. After 31 years on the throne, the reign of Sultan Bayezid II came to an end. The former sultan was sent into exile to his birthplace of Demotica. Before leaving, he bid farewell to the people of Constantinople in a grand and ceremonial procession. He never reached his destination. While traveling to Demotica, Bayezid suddenly died. Some contemporary sources state that the aging and heartbroken sultan died of natural causes. Others claim that Selim had his father poisoned, fearing that Bayezid might still rally supporters and raise another army against him. Whatever the truth, Bayezid, the ruler who had strengthened the Ottoman state, consolidated its territories, and ushered in an era of economic prosperity, was gone. His cautious diplomacy toward the Safavids and his failure to respond decisively during Anatolia's greatest crisis ultimately proved disastrous and led directly to his downfall. Selim eliminates his rivals with his father no longer in the picture. Sultan Selim I immediately began consolidating his authority in the capital. Key government positions were filled with loyal supporters. The palace administration was reorganized. The imperial army stationed in Constantinople was once again fully supplied and prepared for war. Yet while Selim strengthened his position in the capital, his half-brothers Ahmed and Korkut continued fighting one another in Anatolia as each tried to secure his own claim to power. Before leaving the capital, Selim summoned his son Sultan Suleiman and appointed him regent in his absence. Then, at the head of a powerful army, Selim marched into war-torn Anatolia. His objective was clear: to restore order to a peninsula that had become the center of chaos during the previous year. Korkut, who had struggled to gather enough supporters, was caught completely by surprise. Driven from his base in Manisa, he fled and hid inside a nearby cave. When he was finally discovered, Korkut acknowledged Selim's authority and was pardoned. However, the peace did not last. 1 year later, Selim decided to test his brother's loyalty. He secretly arranged for forged letters to be sent to Korkut, supposedly written by influential Ottoman officials encouraging him to join another rebellion against the Sultan. Korkut took the bait. Believing the letters to be genuine, he responded favorably. Having failed the test, he was promptly executed. Despite ordering the execution, Selim reportedly regretted the decision for the rest of his life. With Korkut gone, only one major rival remained. Sultan Ahmed had seized the city of Konya and declared himself sultan. Knowing that he lacked the manpower and resources needed to defeat Selim alone, Ahmed opened negotiations with Shah Ismail, hoping to form an alliance with the Safavids. Before any agreement could be reached, however, Selim moved first. In the spring of 1513, the two armies met near Janissaries. The battle was overwhelmingly one-sided. Ahmed's army was decisively defeated. During the rout, Ahmed fell from his horse and was captured. After the battle, Selim confronted his older half-brother, the same brother who had long enjoyed their father's favor and whose rivalry had caused him years of resentment. Calling Ahmed a traitor and a rabid dog, Selim ordered his execution. With Ahmed's death, the bloody civil war that had ravaged the Ottoman Empire for the previous 2 years finally came to an end. The conflict had claimed the lives of more than 50,000 Ottoman civilians. In total, Selim executed 2 of his half-brothers along with 12 of his half-nephews and great-half-nephews, making this one of the bloodiest succession struggles in the history of the House of Osman. But even as peace returned to Anatolia, another and far greater war was approaching. The Ottoman Empire was now preparing for a final confrontation with the Safavid Empire. Selim's Safavid campaign, 1514, with the civil war finally over, Selim turned his full attention eastward toward the powerful Safavid Empire. Before launching his campaign, he secured his western frontier by concluding peace treaties with Hungary and Poland, ensuring that no threats would emerge from Europe while he fought in the east. During the winter of 1513, Selim sent diplomatic envoys demanding that Shah Ismail hand over the rebellious Sultan Murad, the son of the late Sultan Ahmed. Ismail ignored the demand. With diplomacy exhausted, the exchange of letters quickly gave way to preparations for war. Selim summoned the full military strength of the Ottoman Empire. He began assembling a massive army to destroy what he regarded as the Safavid heresy in the east. By the spring of 1514, all military preparations had been completed. An official fatwa, a religious decree, was issued authorizing war against another Muslim state. After years of rising tension, Selim marched out of Constantinople at the head of an army numbering roughly 100,000 men. About 1/3 of those troops remained behind to garrison eastern Anatolia, leaving approximately 60,000 soldiers available for the coming battle. The march against Shah Ismail as the Ottoman army advanced eastward, one of the largest domestic massacres in Ottoman history, unfolded. In the months before the campaign, local governors throughout Anatolia had compiled official registers listing every Shia between the ages of 7 and 70 living in the towns of Tokat, Shivas, Amazia, Samsun, and Yozgat, along with those living in the surrounding villages. As the imperial army marched through the region, Selim ordered these Shia communities rounded up and executed. He believed they represented a potential pro-Safavid fifth column that could threaten the empire from within. The result was a series of brutal massacres. Up to 40,000 Shias, primarily Alvis and others suspected of sympathizing with the Safavids, were beheaded or stoned to death. To Selim, the coming conflict was not simply a struggle for territory. It was also a war over religion and what he believed to be the very soul of the Ottoman state. While these atrocities were taking place, the Ottoman army crossed the frontier into Safavid territory. At the same time, Selim launched an intense campaign of diplomatic and religious propaganda through a series of letters addressed to Shah Ismail. In them, Selim described himself as the Caliph of God, the defender of Sunni orthodoxy, and the slayer of the wicked and the infidel. Writing in elegant Persian prose filled with quotations from the Quran, he accused Ismail of heresy, oppression, and corrupting the Islamic faith. He condemned the Safavid ruler for forcing the upright community of Muhammad to submit to his devious will, for spreading oppression across the Middle East, and for encouraging his Shia followers to commit unlawful violence and bloodshed.
Shah Ismail responded with only one letter. Far from being intimidated, he dismissed Selim's threats with complete confidence.
According to tradition, he accompanied his reply with a golden box of opium. The gift was a deliberate insult, implying that Selim's fiery letters sounded like the ramblings of an opium addict.
The mockery infuriated Selim.
According to contemporary accounts, he ordered the Persian envoy who delivered Ismail's letter to be executed. By early August 1514, Selim had captured the towns of Erzincan and Erzurum without meeting any resistance. Rather than defending them, Shah Ismail withdrew his forces and adopted a scorched-earth strategy. As the Safavids retreated, they stripped the countryside of food and supplies, leaving almost nothing behind for the advancing Ottoman army. The strategy placed enormous strain on Selim's troops, who had already been marching beneath the scorching summer sun for more than 4 months. The race to Chaldiran. While in Erzurum, Selim received news that Shah Ismail's army had established its camp on the plain of Chaldiran, roughly 250 miles to the southeast. Rather than delaying the confrontation somewhere between Erzurum and Chaldiran, Selim chose to force-march his army directly toward the Safavid position. His objective was clear: win a swift and decisive battle on the open plain before Ismail could withdraw into the mountains of the Iranian plateau. With that decision made, the Sultan assembled his troops for one final advance toward the battle they had all been waiting for. Despite Selim's determination, conditions within the Ottoman camp had become increasingly difficult. The Janissaries were growing restless. The Safavids' scorched-earth strategy had devastated the countryside, leaving little food or water for the advancing Ottoman army. Never before had an Ottoman force marched so far east. Now, exhausted after months of campaigning, the soldiers were suffering from hunger, thirst, and fatigue. One day, while the army was encamped, the growing frustration boiled over into open revolt. Several arrows were even fired toward the Sultan's own tent. Enraged by the actions of his elite troops, Selim mounted his horse and rode before the army, delivering one of the most famous speeches of his reign to restore discipline and morale. He declared, "We have not arrived at our intended destination or even encountered our enemy. There is no possibility of retreating now, and even to contemplate such a thing is a fantasy. Although the servants of the Shah have willingly sacrificed themselves for their master, we have come all the way to these lands in order to correct their ways. These zealots want us to turn back, but we will never do so. As for those with weak hearts and those who make excuses during our march, let them answer to their own consciences. If they turn back now, they have turned their back on our very own religion. If you are true men, come along with me, yet, should it come to it, I shall proceed even alone. Is this, then, how you intend to serve me? Those who want to return to their wives and children should leave us now, but just know I did not come all the way out here just to retreat now. Let those who are cowards be separated from those who take up swords to serve Islam. I will never go back on my decision. I did not come here to retreat in shame." According to Ottoman chronicles, not a single soldier abandoned the army after hearing the speech. Instead, the entire camp erupted into chants praising the Sultan, and the army resumed its march toward the enemy with renewed determination. After an exhausting week of continuous marching, the Ottoman army finally approached Chaldiran. On the eve of battle, however, the soldiers witnessed an extraordinary sight. A solar eclipse darkened the sky. Many in the Ottoman army saw this as a favorable omen. It reminded them of the famous lunar eclipse that had appeared during the final days of the siege of Constantinople in 1453, strengthening the belief that another great victory for the House of Osman was close at hand. On August 22, nearly 5 months after leaving Constantinople, Selim's army reached Chaldiran. The Ottomans established their camp on a hill overlooking the entrance to the plain and immediately began preparing for battle. 2 armies prepare for battle within the Safavid camp. 2 experienced commanders, Muhammad Khan Ustajlu and Nur Ali Khalifa, both veterans of earlier wars against the Ottomans, urged Shah Ismail to launch an immediate attack. They argued that striking before the Ottomans had time to deploy their artillery offered the best chance of victory.
Ismail refused.
Confident in both himself and his army, he considered a surprise attack to be cowardly. After all, he had already won more than a dozen military campaigns, stretching from Georgia to Khorasan, and remained undefeated in battle despite being only 26 years old. Modeling himself after Alexander the Great, Ismail believed that victory came through courage, divine favor, and the religious zeal of his followers, not through tricks or battlefield deception.
As darkness settled over the plain, both armies prepared for the coming battle. Years of hostility between the Ottoman and Safavid empires were finally about to reach their climax. By morning, one of the most important battles in Middle Eastern history would begin. The Battle of Chaldiran was about to be fought.
The Ottoman army, commanded personally by Sultan Selim, was the larger of the two forces, numbering roughly 60,000 men. However, after marching more than 1,500 miles to reach Chaldiran, the soldiers were physically exhausted. At the center of the Ottoman formation stood the elite Kapikulu troops. These included the Kapikulu Sipahi cavalry and the famous Janissary infantry, equipped with firearms, bows, and traditional melee weapons.
They were commanded directly by Sultan Selim and his Grand Vizier, Hursk Said Ahmed Pasha. The Rumelian army, led by Beylerbey Hasan Pasha, occupied the left wing. The Anatolian army, under Beylerbey Sinan Pasha, formed the right wing.
Both wings consisted primarily of Tamarli Sipahi cavalry, while the front of the army was screened by Azab light infantry. Behind the Azabs, at the center of the Ottoman line, stood the army's greatest advantage. More than 200 cannons had been chained together to form a continuous defensive barrier, preventing enemy cavalry from breaking through the gaps. These artillery pieces would prove to be the decisive weapon in the battle ahead. Opposing them stood the army of Shah Ismail I. Although smaller, numbering roughly 40,000 men, the Safavid army was far better rested and supplied. Its forces were organized into two wings supported by a reserve. Almost the entire army consisted of Qizilbash Turkoman cavalry, trained in the fast-moving style of traditional nomadic warfare.
Shah Ismail personally commanded the right wing. Muhammad Khan Ustajlu led the left wing.
The reserve was commanded by Nur Ali Khalifa alongside the Safavid Grand Vizier, Mir Abdul Baqi. Although slightly outnumbered and lacking artillery and other gunpowder weapons, the undefeated Safavid army remained confident that it would deliver yet another great victory for its Shah. As the morning sun of August 23 rose over the plain of Chaldiran, the battle began.
The opening move came from the Ottomans.
A devastating artillery barrage thundered across the battlefield as cannonballs roared toward the Safavid lines. The deafening explosions alone terrified thousands of Safavid warhorses, throwing many of them into confusion and causing momentary disorder among their riders.
Rather than charging directly into the heavily fortified Ottoman center,
gunpowder shatters the Qizilbash rather than launching a direct assault against the heavily fortified Ottoman center where the artillery was most concentrated. Shah Ismail chose a different strategy. He ordered his army to attack the Ottoman wings instead, hoping to outflank the artillery and roll up the Ottoman line from both sides. Leading the charge himself, Ismail drove the Safavid right wing against the Ottoman left, commanded by Hasan Pasha.
A brutal melee followed.
Lances splintered, swords clashed, and arrows filled the air as the Qizilbash smashed through the initial Ottoman defenses. During the fierce fighting, Hasan Pasha, the Beylerbey of Rumelia, was killed amid the swirling dust and chaos. Although the Ottoman left wing staggered under the pressure, disciplined leadership prevented it from collapsing. At the same time, the Safavid left wing attacked the Ottoman right, where Sinan Pasha held command. Here too, the Qizilbash achieved temporary success. Some Ottoman units were driven back. But the battle soon turned. The Ottomans demonstrated the flexibility of their artillery by wheeling cannons from the center toward the threatened flanks. From these new positions, the guns unleashed devastating enfilading fire, tearing through charging cavalry from distances of 200 to 300 yards. Immediately afterward, the Janissaries opened fire. Their ranks fired in disciplined volleys. While the front rank knelt to reload, the soldiers behind stepped forward to fire, maintaining a continuous stream of musket fire. The results were devastating. Qizilbash horsemen and their mounts fell by the hundreds. Their traditional armor offered almost no protection against lead musket balls and cannon fire.
Despite mounting losses, Shah Ismail refused to withdraw.
Again and again, he personally led charges against the Ottoman center.
His elite bodyguards hacked at the chains linking the Ottoman cannons together, desperately trying to break open a path.
In several places, the chains were cut. Small groups of Safavid cavalry managed to burst through the outer defensive line, forcing the Janissaries into brutal hand-to-hand combat with swords and axes. Every breakthrough, however, was short-lived. The attackers were met by point-blank musket volleys and devastating mortar fire, which wiped them out before they could exploit the gaps. By the middle of the morning, the battle had settled into a grim rhythm.
The Safavids attacked. The Ottomans threw them back. Again and again. Although wounded, Shah Ismail continued fighting, personally rallying his warriors for one assault after another. His presence inspired extraordinary courage among the Qizilbash, even as many of their tribal leaders fell around him. One of his most trusted commanders, Muhammad Ustajlu Khan, was killed during the fighting. His death dealt a severe blow to Safavid morale and coordination. Watching the battle unfold from his position on a nearby hill, Sultan Selim realized the decisive moment had arrived. He ordered Sinan Pasha to launch a powerful counterattack from the Ottoman right flank. Fresh Ottoman troops, supported by repositioned artillery, surged forward. The assault smashed into the exposed Safavid left wing and drove deep toward Shah Ismail's camp. Ottoman cavalry swept through the camp, capturing valuable plunder, including one of the Shah's wives. At that moment, the momentum of the battle shifted completely. The Safavid army began to collapse. Relentless artillery fire and disciplined musket volleys had already inflicted thousands of casualties. The plain of Chaldiran became a scene of devastation, strewn with fallen banners, riderless horses, shattered lances, and the bodies of the dead. Realizing that further resistance was hopeless, Shah Ismail finally ordered a retreat. According to tradition, he sounded the signal himself by playing his personal Karni flute from a nearby hill, calling the surviving Qizilbash to rally around him. Only a few hundred managed to regroup. The rest of the Safavid army dissolved into a chaotic retreat. The Ottomans pursued only cautiously, choosing not to overextend themselves. Satisfied with their overwhelming victory, they remained in control of the battlefield while the shattered Safavid forces withdrew. After several hours of intense fighting, the Battle of Chaldiran was over. It had ended in a decisive victory for Sultan Selim I. Ottoman losses are estimated at between 2,000 and 5,000 men, while Safavid casualties may have reached 10,000. The legacy of Chaldiran. The Battle of Chaldiran left a profound and lasting mark not only on Ottoman history but on the entire Middle East. The Ottoman victory demonstrated the decisive importance of artillery, firearms, and disciplined infantry tactics. It halted the westward expansion of Safavid power and firmly secured Ottoman control over Anatolia. For Shah Ismail, the defeat was devastating. The battle shattered his reputation as an undefeated warrior. After Chaldiran, he largely withdrew from personally leading military campaigns. Indeed, no Safavid Shah would ever again personally command an army against the Ottomans in battle. After nearly a decade of relentless conflict with the Qizilbash movement in Anatolia, Sultan Selim I entered the Safavid capital of Tabriz in triumph only a few weeks after his victory. The symbolism was striking. 13 years earlier, Shah Ismail had entered the same city in celebration to proclaim the birth of his new Shia empire. Now, Friday sermons in Tabriz's mosques were being delivered in the name of the Ottoman Sultan. It appeared that the years of struggle against both the Qizilbash and Selim's own rivals within the House of Osman had finally come to an end. A new era of Ottoman expansion was beginning. Although the Ottoman-Safavid War would continue for another 3 years, the outcome had effectively been decided at Chaldiran. The charismatic yet stern Sultan Selim I had begun his reign with remarkable determination and a decisive victory. Even greater conquests, however, still lay ahead. In the next episode of our series on Ottoman history, we will explore Sultan Selim I's war against the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt. Be sure to subscribe and press the notification bell so you don't miss it. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing. It makes a tremendous difference. Our Patreon supporters and YouTube members can also watch more than 300 exclusive videos.